I'm Ruth Thorne. I've been in the church since our first meeting, and it was in September the 11th, 1983. I've been in the church long before it even started because the district superintendent had a committee of people who lived at the landings at that time who belonged to different churches, and he would have meetings to talk about. We had this property that the church owned, the Methodist Church, but there was a stipulation that if we didn't grow the church on the island by the certain period of time, the land would go back to Branniger at the price that the church had paid for it. And we talked about a church, and then we had a minister who said he would be glad to work with this group out here on weekends, but he had another job during the week. That was Ralph Bailey, which is Bailey Hall we now have in his honor. And he came out to talk about starting a church. And I believe that of the 5 couples who were involved, not one of us planned to stay to do that job, because we were all, each of us, involved in our current church and in offices and so forth. And I was a little slow to respond to leaving. I was curious about who was going to stay at that meeting to start the church, and I looked around and there was one person and me. And my husband came back in and he said, "Where are you?" And then he sat down, and that's how we got involved way back, a long time. And so we worked with Ralph, and we had a committee, or people, about 40 people with clowning children. We had like 4 children, and some other family had 4 children, so a lot of were children. We met in one of the meeting rooms that we were able to get from Union Camp or Branniger that would allow us to meet there. And we did that, condo 44 or some number. We met there for years. And then it was determined that we had to put something on the land or else we lose the land. So the church itself, the conference, supplied us with a trailer, and that's how we started. And we spent 5 years in the trailer with about the same group number. We weren't growing, and it was very discouraging, but Ralph would come and work with us on weekends. And then finally Jim came, and we waited a long time for a real minister to have full time. And he really grew the church at that time. And we had just finished building the chapel. That was our first event. And this morning I was walking through the chapel, and there's names on each of the pews. And some people think that's not a good thing to have all these different people's names on the different pews, but at the time we had no money for pews. So we were finishing the chapel, and we thought, well, someone said, "Hey, wait a minute, we don't have any place to sit, any pews." So we went out, each of us, and talked to our friends and said, "Would you give the money for a pew? We'll put your name on it." I'm telling you some of the early situations we faced. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you walk down the middle aisle, you'll see names on all the pews, because they were the ones that made it available to us to be able to have a pew. But we kept waiting for those children to come. And the families, of course, people with children really didn't live at the landings at that time. It was more older couples. So it took us a few years to get young people. Mm-hmm. No. Well, the one thing I want to see in our church growth are the young families and the children, because that's where the church needs to be, to reach out to families. And now that we have more families moving to the island, I think it's a good time for a good place for them to be, grow, and to have a fellowship with other members. I attend Sunday school. One of the reasons we started our Sunday school class actually in the trailer. Rudy Oswell, who is still a teacher today in one of our classes, I asked him at the time, I said, would you lead this class? And he said yes, and he did. And that was back when we were in the trailer. And we had about 5 members in our Sunday school class. We've been in Sunday school ever since. So, the thing that I love about the church is the fellowship. Our ministers, they do such a great job. The leadership of the church, I think they've done a tremendous job in keeping us together through this difficult time this past year. And I'm been so pleased with everything that they've done. And why I like to be here at church in person is it's hard to answer, because it's just part of me. It's just part of my life. I've been in church. I've started in church as a baby. And every Sunday I've been in church. And it's just part of my life.